Welcome back, good people. This is Gmax 1.2 for the beginning modeler, video number 27. The focus of this mini-series is booms and tails. Part 2, the focus being the vertical tail back here. In the previous session, I showed you how to create this left boom using the standard primitive cylinder with a number of segments and how to shape it. And in this section, we're going to focus on the vertical tail, and zip around here so we can get a better look at it. A lot of people take a lot of pains to do this a lot of different ways, and I have too. But I've kind of settled on most vertical tails that the simplest way to do this at the least cost and the best looking result is to use the standard primitive cylinder. So that's what I'm going to use today. I've gone through and created this one just to set the example and show you where we're headed. Now this vertical tail has a number of parts to it. The vertical tail, which is the leading part here. The rudder, which is the trailing part. On the rudder you have the lever, what we call lever trim tab rudder key, which is the animated part name, but it's really the trim tab, which is here. And then we have, for aerodynamic reasons, a boom extension, which is attached to the rudder and moves with the rudder. So that's what we're going to focus on in this step, in this video. My name is Milton Shupe, and this is the 27th video in creating this aircraft, and we've come a long way. We've completed the fuselage, the wings, the spinners, and the props, and the gun ports, etc., etc. Canopy for the cockpit. So we're making pretty good time here. So here's what we're going to do: is we're going to hide everything and just start from scratch from what we got here, so I can show you exactly how I went about building the vertical tail. Well, let's go ahead and hide it. Hide everything. Let's see. Let's just select it all and hide it. And that leaves us with a blank sheet here with a beautiful drawing on it. So what I like to do is create a cylinder that has the appropriate number of vertices to run around this shape. And the number of vertices I've counted up, and I'll tell you why, is 24. So 24 sides on this cylinder. And I want 2 height segments. And this is important. And cap segments is 1. So let's take a look at that first of all. And the reason I chose this, let's just take a look at, well, let's make this see-through so we can well, let's get it out of the way so we can talk about this. Basically, all I did was go around and count up the number of vertices I thought I would need to make smooth edges and make these corners relatively smooth without jagged edges. So I just start with 1, and I'll probably need 2 or 3 here, so 4, and I'll need probably 5 here, that's 9. I need 1 here, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 up here, because this jots out like this. So 24 is what I came up with, and we can always add or even take away as we need to. So let's kind of get this in position and we'll get started. Probably what I'll also try to do is when I'm repositioning the vertices on this, keep in mind that we've got two segments here, so we've got 3 vertices per line. So whenever we're selecting, we want to make sure we've got 3. We've got a hold of 3 of them. So let's convert this to editable poly. These are the vertices we have to work with, and so let's just go about shaping, and it's it takes a little while to do, so that's just the nature of the game here. So we're just going to push the stuff around, and the circle gets a little silly looking sometimes when you're pushing these around, but don't worry about that. And it's going to take a little bit just to kind of go through this process, but I can tell you the result is well worth it. Make sure we ignore back facing off. Otherwise, you're only grabbing what you're seeing, and the other side sit there saying, I wonder if he wants me to go anywhere. Alright, so let's move this guy over to about here. So just bear with me here a little bit, or if you'd like, I can actually pause the video, but I'm listening, but I can't hear you scream at me, so maybe that's an advantage. Alrighty, I was going to use 5 up there, but whatever. 4 or 5. When you zoom in, you can see these aren't nearly as pretty as they look like at a distance, and that's interesting because in the sim it's the same way. Because generally you're 20 or usually no closer than 20 feet, usually more like 30 or 40, 50 feet away from the aircraft, so you don't see these little jagged edges. Between the smoothing and the paint, it all just kind of blends in and looks pretty decent. Probably get away with one there. Sure we got all 3 of them. I think I counted 2 there, but I'll put another one up there. Just part of this bottom here is going to be hidden anyhow, so because of the boom coming in here, it basically hides this area right here. So it's just a matter of shaping, and I can tell you it's a lot faster than using a line to draw this, and then creating 2 segments. So you got to have 3 parts to make those 2 segments, and then once you do that, you got to get the width right. And once you do that, you got to get the iterations around the if you remember back on the fuselage, how many we tried. I think we tried that, and we ended up with a bunch of cross sections. It's kind of crazy, really. Sometimes it's just simpler to use the simplest technique, and you end up with a lot fewer polys and fewer things to go wrong. Your shape may not be precise, but I tell you, you can't see that in the sim. Just can't. So it's kind of silly to go through all the pain. I don't know, maybe that's just 14 years of experience talking, I guess. Pull this on down here so we can maybe make a little better corner out of this. And I'm not going to try to be too precise here. I just want to show you the technique. We can probably use this up here. So it's just a matter of shuffling vertices around and trying to improve on what you got. Like I say, we can always add vertices by selecting the lines and chamfering, but I think what we got here is going to work out just fine. So let's go back to the side view and see. You can see we've got the basic shape here. You do want to, you want to clean it up and make it look good to your eye because you want to be proud of your work. Okay, we've got the shape. So now, whatever that took, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and we got a good, well-shaped start here to what we wanted to do. Now, let's go to the front viewport and let's position this over here where it's supposed to be so you can get an idea of the thickness. It's just thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. So you have to deal with that, and that's really the time-consuming thing as you get into this, is trying to manage all these vertices, go thick at the bottom and thinner at the top and thinner at the very top. And as you go front to rear, interesting, as you go front to rear, you've got this curvature to deal with. Well, it doesn't have to be a perfect curve like that. Like I say, you can't see it in the sim, but we do want it narrower at the front, fatter in the middle, and narrow at the back, so that's what we'll attempt to do. But so let's select all the vertices now. Ignore back facing is off, so we got them all. And we do want to make it a little fatter. We want it at least as fat as, let's pull it over here so we can use that as a gauge. We've got them all selected, so let's go up to our handy dandy non-uniform scale. Let's just fatten this up to about right there, I guess. So we've got the fattest part satisfied, and now what we're going to do is, I'm sure you note that the leading edge of this is quite narrow. And if you look at pictures, it's almost like a knife edge. Well, not really. It may appear that way from a distance, but it's actually a fairly blunt, and I say blunt nose, it may be blunt about an inch or so across, and then it tapers back at angles. So that's what we're going to do right now. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to ignore back facing. We're going to select and do no harm these polys on the outside. And this is why I created a 2-segment cylinder. So now what we're going to do is we're going to scale this. It'll let me, down. I'm going to do it a fair amount. And then let's go to the side. We're going to scale it this way. And the reason I don't use the general scale button is because it won't give you a uniform. Well, let's go back and I'll show you. I've got time to do that. It won't give you a uniform deal. You'll get more one way than you will the other. So you get more to the bottom and top than you do left and right because it's longer that way. So that's why I choose to use the non-uniform scale. So I can choose how much I want in each direction. So now when you look at this, you see we've got nice pointed edges. Pointy at the top. It's probably a little too pointy, and if you was really picky, you could probably go in and chamfer the center one just a little and give you a little bit of bluntness, but as I say in the sim, you're not going to see that. So generally we have a fairly good shape. Now all we have to do is kind of account for the fact that we're wider in the front and widest in the center and very, very narrow back here in the back. So that's what we'll attempt to do next. So let's just grab these front vertices and we're just going to pull them in. Now we're not nice and rounded here because it's not really necessary. But let's see what we have from the front view. It's kind of hard, but you got so many shapes going on here. Now the bottom is typically, what we just did was this area of the nose. So we pulled in that nose area. It's a little fatter at the bottom. It's the fattest right in the center, but it's a little bit narrower across the bottom. So let's just grab those vertices and pull those in a little. Okay, and we're going to do the same with the top. Now let's make sure we got all the ones we want. Aha, look what I got over here. Ignore back facing. How long has that joker been on? Let's go undo all that right quick. Oh, that's been on since I selected those polys. So let's miss any down here. Yes, I did. So, but that was the center one. All right, let's pick it back up from there. So we're back to the front here. Turn that off. You got to be cognizant all the time of what you got selected. And I usually take my time when I'm doing all this and I'm verifying, but because of the video, I have to kind of rush it. Try not to appear rushed, but it is what it is. Alright, so we're going to now do the bottom. We're going to pull it in just a little bit because it's fatter than it is at the top, but it's narrower than in the center. So pull it in a little like that. We've got that done. Now we've got the top to do. So how far down do we go here? How much of all that? Do we want this here? Yeah, I guess we do. We want the next one down, so let's pick that one up. And let's pull those in. You can see in the back there the thinness I'm going for. Now let's deselect these and take it just a little bit further. Alright, we got those. Now we've got these back ones. That we can slender down some more. We only need, already done some of them. We need that group in the center where back facing is off. So let's pull them down compared to what we had up here at the top, you see. Let's pull them down. It's pretty slender back here, so we'll do the best we can. Pick up these two. Alright, I think that makes the point, so to speak. So we've got now a well-shaped deal. It's got the good narrow here, fat here, narrower at the bottom, narrow at the front, fatter at the center, very narrow in the rear. So that's exactly what you want, and we have it. So what's next, boys and girls? The next thing we're going to do is separate the rudder from the vertical tail. So before we do that though, we want to make a cut right on this line here. So I want these vertices out of the way. All I got to do is get them to one side or the other. This top one is okay, but let's move this bottom out of the way. I'm going to cut just to the left of that. And let's do the same down here. We'll move both of them. You know, I'd really like them on the other side, then come to think of it, because I've got some tapering and whatever to do there. I like to keep the mesh straight when I can. Just seems to make for good results. Alright, we go for that. Okay, we're ready to do the cut. So we need to cut all the way through, and we got ignore back facing off, so we're going to select these polys right here. We're going to pull up the slice tool, slice plane, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees, watching the Y axis at the bottom, get to 90, throw the brakes on. Now, I'm going to have to go turn off the shade selected faces. And back to here. Now let's get in there up close and personal so we can get on that just as close as we can. Well, that's pretty good. We're clear of this line up here and clear of these down here, so we should be in good go. We should be go for a cut. So let's do the slice, see what we got, and let's just check the mesh, see if we've done any real damage to the mesh here. Well, that looks good. Let's see if we've got 3 vertices here. Yep. Alright, so let's back out of there and go in here. See if we've got 3 vertices here. We do. So we got a good clean cut. So good. So what's next? You guessed it. We're going to separate the rudder from the vertical tail. Let's be sure we got everything. Yep, looks good. So we're going to detach. Over on the right here, we're going to detach. And we're just going to call this rudder 01. Alright, and while we're thinking about it, let's get out of the sub-object mode. You can't select off until you go back to the full object mode. Somewhere up here, whole object selected, see that? And that's when this is green. So we have this. Let's go ahead and link it to the vertical tail. So now this is a child of the vertical tail. Just to ensure that that took. There you go. Might as well rename this to vertical tail. I usually just call them VTail. And we can call it left. Okay, so now we have 2 parts. Okay, there's really no further work to do on this one, so what's to do on this one? Let's go back to the left viewport. Now we're in a position where we can separate, and if we do a little vertice manipulation here, we can probably just find some appropriate be able to just these should all be on this line anyhow. At least that would make it look nicer. Okay. This is kind of intricate work. Getting tongue-tied here. In that you're working a lot of detail, but isn't that what it's all about? And let's take these 2, just move them up, and make them a part of this. And instead of having to do a boolean to separate this, we'll just have to select those polys and detach them. Does that make sense? Of course it does. Reduces your workload, makes you more productive. Okay, so let's select those polys. Make sure back facing is off. Okay, let's make sure we got the other side. Believe me, sometimes I forget. I do the detach and rename and all that, and then look, and I only selected one side. But yeah, you got so much going on in your mind, just the way it works. So let's detach that and call this. This isn't the official name, trim tab, but I can't recall what the official name is. So now we've got part 3, and it has to be linked to the rudder so that when the rudder moves, the trim tab follows it. Okay, we have 1, 2, and 3. Now, we've got one more part to add. See if we got our hierarchy here. Yep. I forgot now whether we had 4 parts or 5 parts in the other one. We have the boom extension up here, so let's actually that boom extension, I just need to unhide it because I already created it. I already cut off the boom, but there's the boom extension, so it's in there. So that's basically the way I construct these. The final piece then is you unhide the boom, unhide by name, and see if we can find boom easier this way. There we go. And the final piece of this will be then to link this hierarchy with the VTail at the top, link it to the boom. So we've got the trim tab and the boom extension linked to the elevator linked to the vertical tail linked to the boom, and the boom is linked to the wing is linked to the fuselage. So that's kind of the hierarchy of things, and it keeps it all together and helps you find stuff when you need stuff to unhide. Alright, so that's kind of the way you do it. The final part, once you've got all the parts in place, then is to set pivots. The pivots that are important are, as a matter of habit, I always just center the object, line the world, reset scale. On the rudder, you do the same thing, but we need to place its pivot because it's an animated object. So we need to place its pivot. Let's go to local. Right on the hinge point here, and if you see above, up here, there's the hinge. And what I usually do is cut these out and put a hinge-like thing in here. It's kind of really a squarish thing that goes back into the rudder, and there's a rudder pin or hinge here. So I usually place this about right there and make sure it's, if the hinge line is vertical, then of course you want your pivot to be vertical. And I'm not sure if this is the axis it needs to be on. I think it's the y-axis for this, but over here on the trim tab, it's actually the x-axis, which is interesting. I'm not sure why they did that on a rudder trim tab. It's always vertical. You'd think it'd be the z-axis that would be there. So centered object, line to world, and I rarely remember to do this until I see it in the sim rotating around this way instead of left right. So it's kind of weird. So we need to rotate that. Let's make sure we're in local, and I want this X to be pointing downward here, so try to go the right direction here. We'll set it on 90 degrees. There it is. And then we need to line it up with the hinge line here. Hard to see, but the hinge is just slightly back of the line on these, so just put it there where if you wanted to, you could build a little kind of a cylindrical thing here that kind of sticks out and it goes back in each one. And I think there's kind of a geared wheel here, and there's a mechanism back in a rudder that turns that left and right. So that's what that's all about. So there you have it. You have a simple way of creating a vertical tail and shaping it properly, top, bottom, middle, etc., front to back. And I don't know how many polys are in this, but let's just check. Forget the boom extension for now because usually you don't have that in there. But if you go up to the hammer utility button here and do a polygon count, I've got 56 polys in that whole thing, only 56. If I had used, say, line shape to create this and went through all those steps, I would have all kinds of segments, cross sections running up and down and crossways. I mean, it would be crazy. So you have much better control getting your result this way without the heavy poly count overhead, and that's pretty important. One thing I see I forgot here is on the VTail in this particular aircraft. Let's get this out of the way. Hide selected. These particular vertices need to be flat because it just rides on or is built into the boom. So we just pull those down like so. And that'll sit right on the boom. And you really wouldn't see these polys underneath, and you could really just delete them, save the overhead, and reserve those polys for something else in case you needed them. So that's what you'd end up with. Now, we didn't do proper smoothing and all that, and that needs to be done, but I think you're familiar with that. Just select all the polys and go down to the bottom and do an auto clear and do an auto smooth. And then you would have your final result here, and let's see if we can't grab everything here and turn that off and give it a reasonable color. And there you have it, how to create a VTail, simple and easy. Now, it's pretty thin. I mean, sometimes it looks fatter, but I don't have the smoothing on, so that doesn't help. But why not do the smoothing? I think we have time at 33 minutes in this, so we need to be wrapping it up. But let's just select all the polys and run down and do the smoothing. No need to cut this short here any shorter than it has to be. Get off and then select the polys, select all, and clear all and auto smooth. Back to the object level, select the, reminds me of something else I forgot to do, and you can probably guess what that is. Select all and clear all and auto smooth. I forgot to fill in the gaps between these cuts, remember, as we did with the flaps and all that. So in other words, if you look at, these would be simple to do. Obviously, we would just do that and cap it. But if you remember with the flaps and the ailerons, we extruded and then used non-uniform scale and pulled it together and kind of rounded the edges to give you a good looking fit. So that needs to be done on that, and it needs to be done on the rudder and also on the vertical tail. So, and recess into the parent object and extrude on this one into that recess, and then use your non-uniform scale to pull that together. And then what I usually do is that back in place. Then what I usually do once I have that done, especially on the rudder, once you extrude that in and you pull twice on the rudder and pull those sides in with this, then if you take your first set of vertices here and kind of pull it back, about 2 inches, then when you do your smoothing, you'll see that it'll be obvious that the area where the two meet are narrower. Let's go to the original that I built here. I don't want to delete that. That's part of the original. Let's unhide this. It's the original I built. Now you can see the effect here. Let's select that. Let me hide this, and well, yeah, let me hide that. You can see that I extruded twice on this. Look at it from the top. You can see I extruded twice and brought those in. So when I smoothed, then it gives you that shading in here, and then you can tell it's they're two separate objects. It gives you a more natural or realistic look. I did the same thing with the boom extension here. Kind of extruded that in and pulled the insides together, so when the rudder rotates left and right, that won't be hitting the vertical tail. So those are the little things you do to make it realistic. Did the same thing back here on the trim tab. You can see that how it goes inside. And if you hide these two, you can see where I built a concave. A little hard to see. It's all smooth now, but you can see from the lines down here how I extruded in, and then pulled that center part together with the non-uniform scale. So I got a nice round smooth home for the rudder as it's turning in there. If you hide this again, you'll see that you get the nice smooth turning surface here. So it just gives you more realism in your look. And the other thing you do to help with the realism is make sure you put a little gap in your trim tab here, and the same, you do the same for the rudder. If the rudder was sitting on top of say the rudder was a cutout of the vertical tail and it came back this way, you would also put a gap anywhere one of these surfaces sits on another, so they don't freeze together when you're in flight at higher altitude on a cold night. Oh, terrible. So there you have it. Let's unhide all and kind of finish this up as to this is where we are in this video. So the next video we'll build the horizontal H-tail, if you will, horizontal tail, the elevator, and the trim tabs. And then once we have that done, we can come back and clone the left side of the boom and the vertical tail and rudder and trim tab over to the right side, and that'll finish up the tail section. All right, I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any comments, suggestions, post them below, and really appreciate you guys following along here, and I hope you're getting some real meaningful stuff out of it, and it will make you more comfortable in building your own aircraft or whatever objects you wish to build. Okay guys, have a good day, and hope to see you back next video.